Hi, Lydia.
Hello, Cheryl.
Oh my gosh, it's so wonderful to see your lovely, beautiful face. Um, I'm getting a little of an echo. Are you getting an echo, Lydia?
No,
Okay. Um, Amanda, could you, if you tell me why I might be getting an echo and what I need to do, I will do that. But I'll just carry on as if um, things aren't echoing. I'm actually going to take my headphones because maybe that.
oh, we can't hear you now. Your mic is off. You're on mute. I can't hear you. I'm not sure about anyone else.
Can you hear me now?
That time I heard an outer space echo.
I'm pressing the microphone. Okay, now I'm gonna.
That was crazy.
Now, how's that?
Sounds perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
That
So
was
hello.
so weird.
So so everyone out there who is joining us, I'm going to speak as if I'm not hearing an echo, which I am, but that's okay because we can manage this. But I also want to say, just in case you were thinking that you were fooled about this being live, you're wrong. You can see. But in any case, I am so absolutely honored and thrilled that we have truly the great Lidia Yuknavitch here with us today. She's here on the occasion of my Literati Wild Reads book club. Her book, her latest novel, Thrust, is my August selection. And it has been so cool to hear the different perspectives of this book, which is just, well, it's beyond description. It's a feat of research and imagination and language like only Lidia Yuknavitch can deliver it. And I'm just excited to dig in and talk to her about it today. So thank you for joining us, whether you're watching this later or live. So Lydia, welcome.
Oh man, it's such a pleasure to be here and to kind of be with you for a little bit. I miss you so much. I just want to kiss you and hug you and chew on you.
Right back at you, baby. So yeah, in addition to admiring Lydia's beautiful work, we're dear friends too. And we were for a few years in a writers group together as well. So my favorite question that I always wonder when I'm reading a book, so I'm going to just show this gorgeous book one more time, is how was this book born? Like, what's the genesis story of Thrust?
Well, Thrust began as a kind of seed of imagination in the times shortly before COVID hit the globe. And so I was thinking about all the kinds of civil strife and climate change and wars and just difficulties that were emerging in human and non-human life. And I was asking myself, if you wanted to tell a story about those things without killing the reader, what forms would that take? And furthermore, if you wanted to, tell a fairy tale version where there was the possibility of change or hope, what might that look like on the page? Now I'm hearing a scary echo, but I'm just going to keep talking.
Okay.
And what resulted then on the page was a series of kind of small fairy tale-ish turns that have magical objects and interesting characters and little pieces of story about what it feels like to live in difficult times and what it's felt like in the past and the present and possibly the future. So it's kind of a story about storytelling.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I think I've always just loved about you and your work. I mean, I think that there's a way that you talk about the power of story that really transcends that kind of the easy trope, of like, oh, we all need story. Like really, you and I share this actually, is we both actually believe
Yeah.
that story has power, and we mean power like in a lot of ways, in many layered ways. And I think that so much of Thrust is about that, and also like it's both, you're writing about the power of story and all the layered powers of story,
Yeah.
and the ways that narrative like not just shape our individual lives but our collective destiny, right? But also in writing it, you're showing us all of the things that story can do. And one of the things is your story at the very, I was going to say at the heart of the story, but there's so many things at the heart of the story. I was really moved by the story you tell about the Statue of Liberty, which is something that, of course, most Americans have a story about, and you did something different with it. Can you talk to us a little bit about that figure, that statue?
Yeah.
Book?
Well, I, of course, became obsessed and mesmerized the more research I did about this statue. It was like uncovering stories underneath stories underneath stories. And I don't think most of us walking around have accurate stories about that statue.
No.
We've got the stories we've been told, or the romanticized versions, or I visited that when I was 10 years old. It was really cool, which I did when I was 10. Yeah.
I climbed. Did you climb in it and go up to the top? I didn't do that when I was 10. I did it when I was like 23. But I also, when I was a teenager, there was like maybe you remember, was there some kind of fundraising effort to restore the Statue of Liberty?
Yes.
And there was like 5K races all over America. And it was called the Run for Liberty. It was
That's right.
5K as a teenager.
Yeah. And there was a restoration, and it's had work done. It's changed over the years, but also the accurate history of how the thing was built or conjured, and who worked on it. I don't think most people walk around with that story in their head. And so I was kind of just trying to unearth other pieces of the story, not trying to claim the perfect and true story. And I was really interested in laborers, workers, and the stories they carry in their bodies in the present or the past, and people who love each other, and families and fathers and daughters, like, what is the Statue of Liberty once you start uncovering all the pieces of story? And then I was, like I said, obsessed and mesmerized, and I almost didn't want to leave. I almost didn't want to finish writing the book because I loved the research so much.
Right. I mean, I think that one of the first things anyone would say about Thrust is it is such a tremendous work of imagination and language. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But it's also like a lot of research. Like it's a lot of, true stuff, true stuff I didn't know. Like, and this to me also had such resonance, is like that the Statue of Liberty, I mean, just to stay with the statue, there's so many things to talk about, but like it came in pieces, right? And
Yes.
and as you know, I'm a deep fan of the Lidia Yuknavitch oeuvre, or however the hell you say that word. You know how to say. Well, how do you say that word?
Oeuvre.
Oeuvre. I don't speak French, but is that French? God, I hope that's French. But anyway,
yes.
You are obsessed with, you have certain obsessions. One is the body. And so here you are essentially researching, right, the history of the Statue of Liberty. Maybe you already know this, but what's handed to you is this metaphor that basically just bangs you on the head, like this woman's body.
Yeah.
This dismantled body that's mantled. And I'm curious about, tell us about the research and how you brought that into this imaginative work.
Well, the second I figured out or researched that this woman's body was brought over in pieces designed by men. And also the internal structure is from the designer Eiffel, like the Eiffel Tower.
Right.
And it's a corset design. So when I was learning all these things about pieces of women and how to design this colossal woman, it was also started turning into the story of what is a woman's body, what is feminism, what is feminism not, how are women dissected and put into pieces, how is a woman made whole ever, what happens when a woman resists this building or peacemaking. So it went from literal to metaphoric or figurative very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably how the character of Aurora got born, because I thought, well, I need an actual woman to start talking about these ideas in the actual story, because this is a big deal. Somebody's got to say something, and she got born from that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm always fascinated by that creative process. And I wonder, I mean, I know a lot of it is just kind of like inexplicable and kind of magical, and it can't be explained. But
Yeah.
just, I feel like we just got this little tiny glimmer of it in what you were just saying. So you find out this fact through research. It immediately makes like resonates with you thematically, creatively, and
Yeah.
then you create a character to tell. Like it's really, she embodies that idea. Would you say? Do you feel like you write from ideas or feelings, or do you think those are the same thing?
I think often I'm writing from an even dorkier place. I get kind of hooked on or obsessed with objects and images,
Mhm.
and unlike maybe some other writers, for better or worse, I just start following them. I start, kind of hiding and chasing them around to see where they go. And so when the statue was an image that we're all familiar with, then I thought of this character who was moving around in the world with her liberations and defeats. And so they were kind of images, and I follow them, and then I just throw things in their way to see what happens.
Talking turtles, for example.
Yeah, like a talking turtle, like you do. Or let's say an apple.
But like, how does how does the talking turtle get born in your imagination and your mind? Like how some of the more like, I guess, just for lack of a more sophisticated word, stranger or weirder aspects of this book. Like how and why does that find its place in this story?
Yeah, a couple of things. When I was thinking about point of view with one of the characters who recurs a lot, which is a girl named Lysfae, and she's not quite a teen, but she's not a little kid either. She's in that liminal tween space. When I was thinking about her point of view, she looks down a lot, just based on the kind of person she is. And she looks around a lot, and it's the kind of thing she would notice and see. What's on the ground? Worms and turtles and grass and dirt and pennies. So it was a little bit from her point of view and really embodying it in my imagination, trying to find that. But then, as you know, other pieces of characterization can come from your actual life. And when I was 13, I was in the ocean off the island of Trinidad, and a sea turtle actually, I came into contact with it. And so that imprinted on me for the rest of my life in a bunch of different ways. But it came back to me when I was creating character. And so something about the sea turtle that really did touch my body, and creating this character whose point of view is always downward or in an imagined space, it just suddenly made sense that a turtle walks up and starts talking to her. And I confess too, I'm highly inspired by Murakami books. And so it seemed perfectly natural to me in my storytelling that would happen. Because when I'm alone in writing my own stories, nobody's there to stop me. And I can
Right.
make anything I want happen. And so it seemed perfect and good to me.
Yeah. I love the the authority. I mean, obviously the authority with which you do that. And it feels really organic to me. I mean, and even on just the most surface level, to me, my interpretation or my feeling about
Yeah.
those aspects in your work are this like are at root deeply compassionate and has a real awareness that there are stories all around us and
Yeah.
most of them are like the only like we have our story, but that turtle and that worm and that tree, they have their story too. And I think so much of our existence is about pretending that that's not true.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I mean, that's what art does, is it's sort of a corrective to that. You know, I feel like you did that a lot in this book.
Well, that
Is
makes me happier to hear than most things I hear, because a feature of the story is that humans are a piece of existence and we're not the only ones that have stories to tell, which is sort of what you just said. So if any of that was meaningful to you personally, I've been winning. Like, that's it. I don't have to do anything else. That's beautiful.
well, yeah. You're winning, dear sister. I know that for sure. Um, let's talk about your. I'm probably going to mispronounce your name. Lasvi.
You can say it however you want. One way a Lithuanian friend of mine says it is laisvė, but I can't quite say it with all those syllables, so I just say laisvė.
Laisvė. This young woman in that liminal space between girl and woman. Her name means liberty, right? Which, of course, yes, is not lost on any of us. This idea of freedom and liberty and what does it mean to be chained and unchained, I think runs through the book. Can you tell us about that more? Like, what were your ideas or meditations on these notions of liberty and freedom as you wrote?
Yeah. Well, there are several words and concepts in the story that I was trying to literally shake loose to see if they could liberate other meanings inside of them. One is the title. Another that functions like that is apple. But the big one that functions like that is liberty, or her name. And this notion of what is liberty, or what are we chained to in life. So it has one manifestation in the Statue of Liberty and the story of how the chains, the shackles, were going to be way up high in her hand where everybody could see it, but they ended up under her skirt by her foot, hidden. And that had an impact in terms of the story we would carry from there. There's the idea that women are carrying the story in their very bodies, that we're not treated as fully human or deserving of all rights and, freedoms to whole humanness in the world. And so that's a kind of liberty intention or chains we're carrying. There's the liberty associated with the environment and what capitalism and industry has colonized, that, in terms of land and animals and sky and water. And so you see what I mean? I was taking a word and a concept and an ideology like liberty and giving it more than one form, and then shaking it a little bit, not to say screw everything, but to say meanings could still shift. The story could still change if we shake it a little bit and stand in a different position, and that's my response to doom, my response to all this violence and horror we're living in, is to say there's yet a chance the story could change.
Yeah. And I mean, I love that in a lot of ways, this novel is, I mean, it's dystopian, right? And yet I do think it's full of that energy of like hope, or not despair. It's the opposite of despair in terms of like,
Yes.
I get a sense that what you're really writing about is the ways that we have the power, that story has power, and we have the power to change our story, both individually and collectively.
Yes.
It's
And
like a
there's
hopeful dystopia.
Yeah, well, and there are several love stories in the larger story
Right. Yeah.
meant to remind people that one of the ways we do change, our collective and our individual, trajectory is love.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know people have received it or called it dystopian as a category. I don't actually see it that way at all. And here's
Mhm.
why. Um, the water rising in some parts of the world and disappearing in other parts of the world, that's not the future. That's literally on the news
Now.
today.
Yeah.
That there are controlling power structures that are disgusting and repugnant and oppressive upon ordinary people and children and women and queer people right now.
Mhm.
That's today in the news. And so when we use that category, dystopian novel, it used to mean something in the future where things go terribly wrong and kind of get apocalyptic. From my
Mhm.
point of view, I was writing literally inside my present tense, and I was looking for how to pull threads of hope and agency and a different way to tell the story from our present tense.
Yeah.
So when
And
I think of
that's
dystopian, I think of something else.
I do too. And I think too, like maybe part of, that we've been wrong about dystopias all along, because one thing I was struck by a couple of years ago, I interviewed Margaret Atwood,
Yeah,
her novel The Testaments, which is like the sort of prequel to The Handmaid's Tale.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
obviously she's a great writer, but one thing I was so struck by, we were talking really deeply about like all of the terrible, terrible things that happened to her, to women in her, in the Handmaid's Tale series,
yeah.
essentially. And I was just so struck. She said, Cheryl, the thing is, you have to remember is I didn't write anything that isn't happening to women somewhere in the world right now. So
Correct.
like, this isn't like, well, hold on, if we keep going in this direction, here's how it's going to turn out. It's
Correct.
these things are actually already happening in
Yes.
certain societies right now. And I was just like, wow, yeah, it's not future dystopia. This is happening now, and we're in some ways not seeing it. And this was the way, in some ways, for her to show it to us. Really powerful. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought of you. I thought of her when I was reading Thrust, about some of the things that were really bleak and hard.
Yeah, and I've had this conversation about her work, and I've seen that interview and thought deeply about those ideas that it isn't that it's a negative story to say, or these dire things could happen. It's that they already are happening, and her characters often have a line something like, "And what did we do to stop it?"
Yeah.
That's in The Handmaid's Tale more than once.
Yeah.
And it's not to make everybody feel shitty and guilty, but it's to, again, jostle you into looking to see what's around you to make sure you're not standing, in the very shit we're critiquing
To
without a
thrust us
shovel.
in the direction of action.
Yes.
So I want to say, for those of you who are out there listening to this live, first of all, my deep apologies for the terrible squealing and echo and it's not our fault, it's our computer's fault. But if you have questions, put them down in the comments below, and the wonderful magic genie of a person named Amanda will pop them into the chat, and I will ask Lydia your question. So, okay, that's our little parentheses. So please put them in the below. So Lydia, sorry if I'm like hopping around from one thing to the next. I have so many questions.
I love being here. I don't care.
Well, first of all, just being your friend, like I felt like, so Light Vay's mother is a linguist, right? I feel I was like, oh, that's the little Easter egg. That's Lydia. I was always looking, that's Lydia. Language is, I mean, I won't speak for you, but what I would, if I were speaking about you and your writing, I would say, and this is true of all writers, language is our God,
Yeah.
but you have a very original relationship to language. Like, I feel like you build whole like whole like novels, essentially driven by like the ways you can get lost in the meanings of one word, right?
Yeah, it's true.
And I just thought that that was, you know, really in some ways an interesting, like I started to feel like, you know, the question I want to ask you is like about structure, that so much of this novel that moves through time and space can feel sometimes not rooted in the, like, you don't get to just grab along to one rope and we pull you right straight through. It goes here and there and back and forward and all of that. But to me, what the rope I always hold through your work is the language. And I'm curious about, you know, how you develop a structure of a book that is as complex as this. And am I right about language being our guiding light?
Oh, yes. I mean, in ways that aren't as chaotic as my weird brain, it's sort of like I see language like the ocean.
Yeah.
And when I'm writing a novel, I'm swimming in the ocean and I'm literally collecting things, dead things and living things and images and creatures. And then when I have this collection, I'm bringing it back and looking for what are the relationships between the objects and the words and the feelings, and where can I get language to remind people of that. And that's why so many images and objects repeat in the novel. It's to help readers swim like I swim in the ocean of language and imagination. But I'm not just throwing people in the ocean. I'm like, look, here's a rope. And the
Yeah.
rope will appear later. And the apple will appear later. And the turtle will help guide
Yeah.
you. So it's like I'm trying to give the reader the experience of what it's like for me to be inside language and art and imagination without drowning them necessarily.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And of course, I mean, I just want to say to those of you who are listening, Lydia wrote an absolutely stunning memoir called The Chronology of Water that is a lot of people's favorite book. Everywhere I travel, people, when they come to my events, are like, you know, Lydia Yuknavitch, her book, The Chronology of Water, saved my life. I'm like, I know, saved my life too. So, you know, you expound more deeply on that kind of the way that the ocean is a structure, which
Yeah.
seems impossible because I mean, what I love about the ocean is right there's this deep predictability and rhythm in that thing that happens over and over again, and yet this vast, you know, this vast mystery that we
Yeah.
cannot hold,
Yeah.
you know.
I do.
So we have a couple questions, Lydia. One is the first is from Shirley. What do you do to get into the mind space where you can tune into other perspectives, especially non-human perspectives?
Well, I'm a firm believer, as Cheryl knows, into creating dedicated space, which is one thing, you know, a private area, even if it's a closet or a bar stool or the bus. But I'm also a fan of way over ritualizing that space. Like I've made my laptop so you can't see the whole room because I didn't want to frighten anyone. But I have talismans and images and rocks and shells and hair and feathers and just all kind of shit all over the place to over ritualize the space. So when I walk in here, I'm leaving that world that's so difficult for me to navigate as a person. And I'm entering an imaginal world that really feels magical. So I highly recommend it, even if you just have to tape shit on your face or wear a different outfit. Ritual works. It's a form of magic.
I agree. You and I share the talisman thing big time. Yeah, that matters a lot to me. From Michelle, the structure was such a joy to read, she says. I agree. Thank you. Is Latve's mother based on someone in your life? I loved her as a character so much. I think it's Lydia, like in some kind of different, you know, obviously just deep Lydia, but maybe not.
It feels it's such a compliment that you say that, Cheryl, because I wish I had a mother like Lice's mother, but that you think that just makes me really shy and like embarrassed. That's very beautiful. Thank you for saying that. I think In my imagination, she's sort of based on how I had to mother myself in one way. I think my older sister is often a piece of the older woman characters I create because we're both survivors of a poopy family and we had to bond with each other or die. And so I think there's a little of my sister Bridget in that character too. But I'm also just trying to explore the space of mother and ask, what if it looks, feels, sounds, and is defined differently than we have so far understood it?
Mhm.
And so I tried to bring that question up, both in the character of Lice-Faye's mother, but also Aurora as mothering these orphan children, or her treatise on motherhood, or, I'm just trying to open the space of mother up without concluding what it really means, because I wish we would do that.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, I agree with you on that. So here's a couple questions that I always just loved. I love to hear from other writers the answers to these because I myself almost always have like a favorite, or favorite might not be the word, a sentence in the book that means a lot to me. Like maybe, a sentence that in some way feels like a core piece of what I was trying to do in the book, or something that was really powerful to me or electrifying when I wrote it or thought of it and first put it down on my laptop. Is there a sentence in the book that you can tell us a story about that's really important or special to you?
What a cool question. Well, I'm a Gemini, so of course there's more than one sentence.
Oh, of course. There are lots, but I just mean pick one.
I think I tried to find that kind of sentence for each character I loved the most. And so that's what I meant. The sentences are, I don't mean the whole book, but the sentences are polyvocal. They're like more than one voice of a sentence would be a way to say it. If we had German, we could make a word that had all of that in it.
Right.
So it would be a sentence that has more than one voice in it. But a very important sentence that has more than one form in the story for me is, we don't have to be the stories we inherited. We could change the story at any time. And I believe it for the individual characters and individual people like you and me, and also collectives, that we owe no allegiance to the stories we inherited. And if that's true, at any moment we could let go of them and create different ones. That's definitely at the heart of the matter for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's so beautiful and true. And you could spend I have a feeling both you and I have spent our lives
Yes.
doing that. And it's a long, long story,
Yes.
many, many things. But
And then Cheryl and Lidia began to weep openly.
That's right. That's right. Okay, a couple more questions from Dave for one or both of us. Do you typically have a terrifying thought and then spend time deconstructing that particular thought to develop your narrative? Or are the horrifying thoughts themes unearthed as you plow through your narrative work?
Well, if you're talking about the more difficult material, because I often write about war, I have in other books, war and violence against women and children. And looking at your question, because I can see it, both. I mean, I'll have a wake me up in the middle of the night thought that's very disturbing or scary, and I'll want to work with it like a seed and turn it over in art to transform it. And I run into things along the way while I'm creating narrative that are unearthed, as you say. And so then you have to deal with them at the level of the story you made too. So I guess it's sort of both.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think that my work doesn't usually begin from so much of an idea, you know? So I don't have terrible things can happen I can write about terrible, difficult things, but they almost always begin with something else, like not that sense of like something awful and then I have to somehow come up with a story to write it. I just like I'm a believer that I think you are too, Lydia, that telling the truth about anything makes it less terrible, makes it less terrifying, even the most awful things. You know, just to tell it, to see it, to look at it, to bear witness to it. That's like, I feel like that's what makes, like, that's what denudes it of its power, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Rachel says, what about the weaving you do in your books, Lydia? How do you weave through water? The ocean cannot be tamed. You try to tame it. You know, the butterfly stroke, that's kind of a...
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm not taming the ocean. I'm sewing butterfly through it. It's like the body is the weave, so that's one way to answer it, of course.
Yeah.
How I would probably answer it. But other things to consider are the physics of the actual ocean. Waves weave through ocean. They are energy weaving through fluidity. Particles and waves are a form of weaving, the way they move in and out of each other. What a hermit crab does with a vacant shell is a form of weaving. So it's true the ocean itself is vast and fluid, but there are patterns within it that make weaves, including the dead and the living and the past and the present. It's kind of like the cosmos. The weave are in the patterns that emerge, not so much the cosmic or oceanic entity itself. And all narrative, all storytelling is, how do I arrange patterns? I just happen to arrange them non-linearly, but that doesn't mean there's no pattern. It means I picked a non-linear pattern.
Yeah. One of the things we were talking about before we got on is like there are always a range of responses to any book, you know. There are always books. I took great comfort in this as a writer. When my first book was about to come out, I realized, like, there is not a book that everyone loves and everyone hates, like, you know. And we even in our own conversations as friends, you know, have talked about books that I loved and you didn't, or that you loved and I didn't, and then other books that we both love. And so there's no accounting for that, right?
No.
And I'm curious about, my theory is, like, you know, we each seek something different in the experience of reading, you know? And one of the things I just absolutely loved about that rave review you got it was at the Washington Post, right? Ron Charles, is that right? One of my favorite, if you're all listening, those of you listening, go out and read that review of Thrust, because it was such a rave and so fun to read, and just brought joy to my heart to read that. But I loved that there's this moment where I wish I had the quote in front of me, but he's basically just like, listen, sometimes this novel is like bananas and I have no idea what's going on, but it's so brilliant that I don't care. Like, I'm going with it. I'm going to just go with Lidia Yuknavitch. So I'm curious about that. Like, for you, like, when you are writing this book, do you feel like this is a difficult book to follow or read or understand all the time what's going on? And as a reader, do you like that experience?
Let me answer the second part first. I used to like that experience as a reader and a writer, to make difficult puzzle box novels, or to read the most difficult puzzle box novels. With Thrust, for better or worse, I didn't want that, and I wasn't trying to do that. I really was trying to string together micro stories, or little storytelling tales, folk tales that happen in a row, that then you're holding in a basket or your arms or something, and you're looking at them like my collection of rocks. You're looking at them going, oh, aren't those beautiful? And look at the relationships they have to each other, without, thus the moral of this story is... Right. And really, it was me trying to be playful and loving, which, as usual, came out kind of weird.
But I love that. That's a really great way to describe the structure. I mean, I know the water works, but it is like these there's many stories. They are like a basket of beautiful rocks. So
Yeah.
maybe, but did you love when Ron Charles said that, or were you just kind of like,
Oh, I just got so shut. No, I like went in the bathroom and hid because I felt really shy, and somebody said that, and then
somebody
I
said that?
just
But maybe just what he went is like, I have this basket of rocks, and I don't know what every one of these rocks means, but I love it anyway. And I think that, you know, that is beautiful high praise. And I think that's so much what the gift of this beautiful book is. It is why I chose it for my book club. Now, tell me about, we talked a tiny bit, but why the title Thrust?
Thrust is another one of those words like liberty or apple or Statue of Liberty or any of that that could mean, I'm trying to playfully tickle you into believing it could mean 100 different things instead of the phallocentric or fight-oriented spear thrusting idea. And
Or sexual thrusting.
exactly. And so it's the thrust of a child's imagination, or the thrust of the Statue of Liberty's arm, which is not holding a spear and not killing anything, or the thrust of lesbians' hips with other lesbian hips, or gay male hips that are not reproducing children in the same way as we've inherited traditionally. And so, or the thrust of mushrooms and mycelium roots, or the thrust of a tree. All of those thrusts happen in this book as a way to remind you that words are carriers of infinite possible meanings and dreams. And I just kept telling a version of that over and over again.
Oh, Lydia, I love you. I love your work. Long may you thrust, dear sister. Seriously. Just, it's always, you know, I just, it's always magnificent to talk to you about 30 things that you said. I wish I were like, I'm gonna have to listen to this again so I can jot down all the great quotes. Please, somebody go out there, go do that and put all those quotes on like Lydia's Goodreads page.
Oh,
Do you ever do that? Like, I've discovered it. That's really a great source for writer quotes.
I'm
Say
too
brilliant
frightened.
things, people will put it on your page.
There are two realms I avoid. One of them is Amazon reviews, and the other is Goodreads review. I can't go there. I'm an introvert. It would kill me.
Oh no, me too. I've never even peeked at like that stuff for me. But go on. So I don't know. I don't even know. Like I Google like quotes by writer, and it always brings me to Goodreads, and there are all these like, you know. So I'm on their pages like the best quotes from. I bet if I looked on your page, there'd be like, and there's stuff from your books. There's stuff you said in interviews. You said a lot of really worthy stuff.
I don't even know that.
I know. I live in fear as well. Like you don't want to read what people think. But what I can tell you, dear heart, is I said to you this to you earlier today. You are an absolute national treasure. You're an international treasure, actually. And I feel so lucky to be writing and reading at the same time that you are. Thank you so much for being here.
Such a pleasure, and back at you, and you know I feel it.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for stopping by to listen to me and Lydia have this conversation about her new, brilliant, fabulous, breathtaking book, Thrust. There we are. It's like a cover, like one of the best covers I've ever seen in my life. And good luck to you, Lydia. Happy writing, happy reading. Thanks again.
Gratitude, huge gratitude.